we just kind of, make these things and it's sort of the side deal. We didn't think it would become our jobs, but it did. As that happened, we started noticing that there were questions about storing Bitcoin, but then it became, okay, how do I send Bitcoin privately? And then it became questions about VPNs and Tor. And we started to become knowledgeable on these topics. We ended up learning a lot too, because when we didn't know the answer to a question, we had to find people who did, and we'd write blog posts about it, and before you knew it, we were answering lots of questions about not just crypto and Bitcoin, but about cybersecurity more generally. And that's when we changed the brand from BillFodl to Privacy Pros.
I live unbanked off of cryptocurrency, and I use Bitrefill extensively because it lets me pay with crypto at places that don't yet accept it directly. This one service, more than any other, helps me live on crypto, pay your prepaid phone bill, or buy gift cards to thousands of major retailers around the world, all with cryptocurrency, including for exact amounts so you don't have to buy more gift credit than you need for a specific purchase. You can use Bitrefill without an account, but if you get an account, you can earn rewards points, which translate to savings, and you can also hold a balance denominated in dollars or euros to protect yourself against market crashes. Go to bitrefill.com, click Create Account, and enter the referral code DCN, or follow the link in the description. So, hey everyone, I have the wonderful pleasure of speaking with the one and only Colin Aulds, co-founder of Privacy Pros, which used to be known as BillFodl. How's it going, man?
I'm doing great. How are you, Joel?
I'm doing fantastic, and one of the reasons is I finally, for one, picked a guest who knows I use a microphone, which...
Yes. I have a lot of experience with that. I actually have a... I didn't have a minor technically, but if I did have a minor, it was in audio engineering, so I'm very familiar with pro audio, so...
Yes, that's always a plus, because when I wanted to talk to you, and I saw you also did a podcast, I'm like, oh god, this is gonna be great. No more toilet audio.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I hope it comes through nice.
Yeah. So back in the days of conferences, does anyone remember conferences? I remember coming in contact with the BillFodl team. I don't know if you were there or it was someone else. I can't remember.
Which conference was it?
I can't even remember that. If it was World CryptoCon, or if it was something in Austin, or if it was Libertopia, or...
Well, Brian was at BitBlock Boom in Austin, and then we attended Bitcoin 2019, and we were also at this conference in Miami called... Oh, I forget what it was called, but it was in Miami, so I feel like you would remember that if you were there. But
I would not. But however it was, I've always been intrigued at this whole concept of kind of more hard backups for cryptocurrency, and that's sort of where it came in. Is I remember hearing about stuff like CryptoSteel and stuff before, and then I thought, oh, this is like one of those things, and I've been kind of keeping up with that. So before I kind of ramble too much on that, would you mind describing really quick what Privacy Pros is and what you guys actually do?
Yeah, so Privacy Pros started off as basically just an e-commerce store, and it was at that time it was BillFodl.com, and BillFodl was just this company that my brother Brian and I started together in December 2017, so right at the end of that bull run, which was kind of like the worst time to start a company in this space. But
yeah, with all the hope, and then it all goes down.
Yeah, that was the peak, and then it was just downhill from there for a while. And maybe we're seeing kind of resurgence now, but that remains to be seen. But anyway, we did not invent this concept. I mean, really, the idea of backing up sensitive data on something hard is quite old, obviously quite old. I mean, people have been doing this for, at least even in tech, for decades. They've been stamping metal plates with sensitive passwords and that kind of thing to make sure that they don't lose them.
Or the King's Seal.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah.
But the first person to really do a product like this was a company called CryptoSteel. And they did a Kickstarter in like 2015 or 2016, I think, and they raised a bunch of money, and then they made this product. But they open sourced it. And the issue with the crypto steal was that, um, well, I mean, I guess it was just so popular that they could just never keep it in stock. They
Mm-hmm.
really weren't very good at operations. The user experience of the product was really bad, and it was really expensive. And my brother approached me and said, I'm thinking of like making this thing, but doing it better. And
Yeah.
so I joined in on him with that, and we made it so it was easier to put together. We made it more cheaply. We made it out of better steel, better customer service, faster shipping. I mean, just on every metric, I think it's improved. I mean, that was the whole point we started the business. And also, the other big thing was that we always had stock, so that
Mm.
when you go to Crypto Steel and they inevitably don't have stock, 9 months out of the year, you can come to us and get it, and you're going to get a better product and get better treated. So we did that, and it was really successful, way more successful than we kind of thought. We sort of thought it would be this thing where we just kind of, make these things, and it's sort of this side deal. We didn't think it would become our jobs, and but it did.
Mm-hmm.
And as that happened, we started noticing that there were we would get questions about storing Bitcoin, but then it became, okay, how do I send Bitcoin privately? And then it became, it became questions about VPNs and Tor, and we started to become knowledgeable on these topics. And we ended up learning a lot too, because when we didn't know the answer to a question, we had to find people who did, and we'd write blog posts about it. And before you knew it, we were answering lots of questions about not just crypto and Bitcoin, but about cybersecurity more generally.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we changed the brand from BillFodl to Privacy Pros.
Yeah.
And that was done about 3 or 4 months ago, I think.
Yeah, so just to, obviously, I think most of the audience is relatively knowledgeable, but I'll do the quick little newbie breakdown. When you have your cryptocurrency that you control, the way you back that up in case your phone gets destroyed is you write it down on a piece of paper with, a bunch of the recovery phrase. And then,
Right.
Paper is very flammable and other things like that. It's very easy to destroy. So there are these little metal plates, these little like Scrabble letters that you kind of do as like a metal secure based virtually indestructible backup of this. So if you do get into a house fire, or if you just, get in a boating accident, goes down to the bottom of the river or whatever, you can fish it out and get it. And it's, kind of more, and that's kind of what BillFodl was, or still is, or Privacy Pros. BillFodl, is it still the product name, by the way?
Yeah, it is. We're leaving the product name the same. So it's Privacy Pros BillFodl if you want to be pedantic about it. But yeah.
Yeah, so I noticed some other stuff. For example, Faraday cage wallets or Faraday cage bags. So I know a little bit about this stuff, but do you want to just quickly break down what even is a Faraday cage and why would anyone ever want one?
Sure. It's really simple. A Faraday bag is just something you use to make sure that an electronic device cannot receive any radio signal of any kind once it's inside the bag. So I think, obviously it's called a Faraday bag because it comes from I believe his name is Michael Faraday. He created the Faraday cage a long, long time ago. And you can look at pictures of that, and it's kind of cool. But mainly, before it was used by consumers for privacy purposes, it was really used by law enforcement to prevent evidence from being tampered with remotely. If they had commandeered a computer or a cell phone or something like that, and they didn't want someone wiping something remotely, they just put it in a Faraday bag.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so why would I want something like that?
Yeah, so there's a couple reasons you might want something like that. I'm trying to think of a good example from today's world of 2020. If you are protesting in Hong Kong and you want to take your phone with you, but you don't want it to, you just don't really know who's tracking you, then maybe you keep it with you in a Faraday bag while you're out, and then you can take it out if you want to do what you need to do. Go to a safe place where it doesn't look like you're taking part in the protests, and then when you want to go back and protest, then you just put it back in the Faraday bag and go on your way. That's kind of a more paranoid use case. A really paranoid use case, but I don't know actually how paranoid it is I use it to store my Ledger Nano X, because that thing does have a battery and it does have a Bluetooth capability. And, Ledger swears up and down that you can't sign a transaction remotely via the Bluetooth, but their code is closed source, so I kind of have to take them at their word. So I don't know, or there's a vulnerability. Maybe someone figures out a way to use the Bluetooth while the device is off. I mean, maybe they can activate the battery. I don't know. So I'm a little paranoid about that. So I put it in a small Faraday bag when I'm not using it.
Yeah, as I would probably say you should, because I remember there was, in the hardware wallet world is like pretty fascinating to me. And
right.
There's this one guy I love to follow on Twitter called Salim Rashid, who is just like 15, 16-year-old kid who's just an expert at breaking every single hardware wallet out there.
Oh, yeah, I think he's found some of the bugs in the Ledger hardware wallets.
And there was one, I can't remember the name of it. BitFi might have been it, but it was like a hardware wallet that didn't connect by a cable. It was like a Wi-Fi connection, and they swore it was like super secure and they actually marketed it as unhackable or something like that.
Yeah, they always say that.
Within like a week, this kid was, playing like Doom and Quake on the thing and stuff. He just got in there, and then the CEO was freaking out on him on Twitter and spinning up sock puppets to freak out on Twitter too and all. It was a giant mess. So I don't remember if that's the company name, and if I got the wrong one, please forgive me for spreading all that. But it was quite entertaining. So yes, I would definitely not trust something like that. And I know the Nano S or like old Trezors and things like that, they don't have a battery, right?
They don't, and they don't have Bluetooth either. So there's not really a remote way to control them. Another use case that just occurred to me that it's more for a regular person. A lot of people, well, I say a lot. There's probably a few people out there who use them when they're traveling to store their passports and their credit cards, because they have these RFID chips on them. And it's very common when you're traveling to someone to swipe them. They'll just have an RFID scanner in their bag. They'll try and rub up next to you, bump into you, and try and scan the data off of them, and then try to steal your identity or use your credit card numbers to buy stuff. And so that is not possible if your credit cards and your passport are stored in a Faraday bag.
Yeah, and there's another example I thought of, which so unfortunately, I know a few people who are in college right now, and worse than anywhere else in the world, it seems like universities are big on the whole contact tracing thing. And so they're very much like, you can't leave campus, and if you do, you can get expelled and all this kind of stuff. And they have said, like, you've got to install the contact tracing apps on your phone. And so, they do a bunch of stuff like that. And so, I mean, that's pretty horrific and Orwellian if you ask me. And, well, a good thing would be, what if you just stick it in this bag here, and you just like, did you went off okay, sorry, my phone was not working, my battery died. And then they're like, Yeah,
I always wonder if you couldn't just turn your phone off in that case.
Yeah,
but,
it works as long as you have a battery charge, though, I believe. And so the problem is modern phones. Like I remember not too long ago, I had a phone that you could pop out the battery, and whenever I was having too sensitive a conversation with someone, just flip out the batteries and just be done with it. But now it's like, and that was not always foolproof back then, but now it's, kind of impossible. So
yeah, now, you never really know.
Yeah, there's just a ton of reasons why you'd want to kind of keep your phone private from people who are trying to spy on you. Now, one thing that I was thinking of is, and maybe it's inspired by that scene in The Departed where everyone's like has their phones on and they're all trying to trace and everyone turns their phones off, and then they don't have the signal anymore.
Right.
What happens though, as far as, do you ever get any negative reactions, or can you foresee any from just putting your phone in a Faraday bag? Because basically whoever is monitoring you is always used to every device just always being on and accessible. and then it just completely goes dark, and that actually draws more attention. Like, when you actually stand out from the crowd rather than, protecting your privacy. Is that founded or unfounded at all?
Yeah, this is actually an interesting argument, and it's one that I've seen smart people make about using VPNs, that a VPN provider is actually just a giant honeypot for attention from law enforcement, because the idea is that, well, the only people that would be using VPNs are people who are guilty, and if they can crack the VPN provider to hand over all the data, then they basically had all the criminals selected for. Whereas if you're just using the regular internet and you're not trying to hide anything, then you're kind of, maybe your activity gets lost through obscurity. There's just so many other people accessing the internet that way that you actually aren't standing out, even when you're doing something, A, that you're not supposed to be doing, or B, that you just prefer people not know about. And, maybe that would be, that might be the case someday. I don't know if enough people are using Faraday bags for it to matter. So I guess the answer to your question is yes, if they're really watching you. If they're specifically trying to monitor you, and there's this very strange behavior from your cell phone from their perspective that, man, even when his battery's dying and undying all the time, like really quickly.
He must have a really crappy phone.
5 minutes later, he has a fully charged battery again. Maybe that would be suspicious, but I don't know. My feeling is that if you are being watched that closely, you probably have bigger problems than your cell phone acting strangely. I mean, the dirty truth of cybersecurity that most people don't tell you is that it's really, if someone with enough resources really wants to find you, they will. Yeah. They will find you, almost certainly. It's really just about, okay, what level of privacy am I comfortable with in exchange for the bad user experiences I'm going to have? Because the truth is that not caring about your online privacy is really great for your user experience. Anyone who has tried to use Tor and Google will tell you that Google is almost impossible to use when you're using Tor, for instance. And so a lot of people just aren't willing to give up the ease of use of Google to use Tor, and that's fine. It's not to say that you can't have the best of both worlds. Maybe you only use Tor sometimes, which is what most people actually end up doing. But I guess what I'm saying is that the example I like to use is when you're running away from a bear. You don't need to outrun the bear. You need to outrun the guy that's also running away from the bear. Yeah. And we do this every day with our house. I mean, if we really wanted our house to be secure, we wouldn't have windows. And we would only have one door, and we would have, I don't know, really great alarm system that we'd pay a lot of money for, but we don't do those things because we don't really feel like we need them to stay safe. And for most people, the most hardcore cybersecurity is not going to be worth the cost they pay for it. So
yeah, of course,
that's the truth of cybersecurity.
Yeah. Now, do you think it's beneficial if you kind of end up making Faraday bags a little more popular? So then a lot of people are coming on and offline, and like right now, if someone just dropping off completely might be a little bit of a red flag. Like, what's that guy? We weren't looking at him before, but we are now. But then if everyone does it,
Yeah, I mean, Faraday bags are a little tougher because they do kind of, in a way, I mean, a large portion, if not the majority, of the usefulness of your cell phone, for instance, comes from being connected to the internet. Yeah. And when your phone is in a Faraday bag, you're not going to be connected to the. I guess you could hardwire in, but that has other privacy implications that you can mitigate other ways. But I suppose you could run your phone in a Faraday cage that's hardwired into the internet, and you could get some protection out of that while maintaining some of the usefulness of your phone. I am seeing more and more of these RFID blocking wallets for credit cards and passports that people are carrying around. So that's becoming more common. But the phone is a bit of an interesting case because of the way that we use them. We use them to surf the internet and to use applications and to talk to our friends. And I really think Faraday bags for your phone are good, but they're really better for RFID swiping, and also if you have a car that uses a key fob. This is another reason people use them, is that you can go online to YouTube and you'll find these great videos of these guys who make these devices out of Russia, and I believe they're called signal extenders. And they just kind of stand between your house and your car, and it extends the signal of the key fob so that they can use it to unlock your car and turn on the ignition and drive away with it while you're sleeping, for instance. So that's another use case. But for the phone, it's good if you're really paranoid. If you're going to go out to some protest with Chinese military nearby, or maybe if you're part of BLM or one of these anti lockdown protests, and you worry that they're tracking you, but you want to take your phone with you, then I think that's kind of the use case for those bags.
Yeah, and is there any, as far as you know, is there any sort of in most semi-free societies, right, any kind of a legal implication for protecting your privacy in that way? Like, if you decide to, put your phone in one of those, and someone finds out, are you gonna be legally liable in any kind of way? Have you heard of this sort of a thing ever happening?
Sure. Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm not a lawyer, so consult your attorney and take anything I say here with a huge grain of salt. This is not legal advice, but I find it very hard to believe that in most Western democracies, and especially the United States, that voluntarily opting to block remote communication to your electronic devices would be illegal. Presumably you do this every time your battery runs out of juice.
Yes.
So it's just, I think it'd be hard to prove, even if it was illegal. And there's just so many good legal reasons to want to do that I just find it hard to believe that would be illegal. And the other thing that leads me to believe it's not illegal is that there's so many people selling these things, and we've never gotten a notice from any sort of law enforcement telling us to stop. So,
yeah. Now, in a post-Snowden world, just generally, like your finger to the wind, do you see the issue of privacy becoming more important to people? I mean, there's a lot of, like, I'm sure the amount of privacy infringements was probably at its peak around the Snowden times, or possibly today. And obviously a lot of people see him as a hero and things like that. And he gets a lot of press and coverage, and he gets on major things like, say, the Joe Rogan podcast. It's all over the place. Do you think that the average human being in, the greater Western world, or the greater world, is starting to take privacy more seriously? Or do you think it's just still a fringe thing? And I'm sure things like, how popular your business is a good metric for that, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know how good of a metric our business is for it, to be honest with you. I think that our business really selects for the kind of people who would care about this. And maybe the amount of people that need to take it seriously because of what they do for a living, or what they do online, or maybe that number is growing just because tech is growing, populations are getting bigger, and so that might skew the results. I think we have a very hardcore selection bias among the people that shop on our store. I hate to say it, but my sense is that it's confusing because people are more aware that they need to sound like they care about it, but I don't see people caring about it. It depends, I guess. So I see more and more people using password managers, which is a good trend, I think. So on that front, yes, the VPN business is really big. Lots of people use them now, but mostly people use VPNs because they want to watch, UK's Netflix library when they're in the United States, or they live in South Korea and they want to watch porn. That is really what people are using VPNs for mostly. It's really not that they're concerned that their ISP knows every website that they visit.
Yeah.
I think when you tell people that, they're a little disturbed by it. But really people just want to surf the web as fast as possible. And VPNs usually, not always, but usually don't increase the speed at which you can download something. They usually decrease it. Tor limits your ability to access all sorts of sites because, as I said, sites like Google will block Tor. Or they at least try to. Password managers, I think one reason we see them increasing in adoption is people see how often their parents get hacked because they use the same password everywhere, and they just don't want to deal with it. So, but on the other side is they're very easy to use, and they actually make your life easier. You don't have to remember, oh, did I have to use the version of my standard password with letters and characters? I remember, years ago, back when I, didn't use a password manager and I had to kind of remember, which password did I use with this service? It was just annoying, and I was constantly having to reset passwords. And now I never have to do that because of my password manager. And so, unlike VPNs and Tor and Faraday bags and BillFodls, password managers make our lives easier while making us more secure. And that's a very rare mixture. So to answer your question, I really don't see people caring about privacy. People really care about user experience more than anything else.
Yeah.
And they pay a price for it, but until they really feel like they're paying a price for that user experience, they're not going to change. People just don't. It's like telling a smoker they're going to die of cancer. They may know, but I don't, until they get a real scare, it's really hard for them to quit.
Yeah, and I also noticed that that's a good point about how people do care about privacy where it impacts their user experience. Like, for example, trying to watch Netflix overseas or whatever. And I think that just from the crypto world and stuff, I noticed that the more layers of banks have to be involved in things, just the worse the user experience is.
Yep.
And so,
that's exactly right.
I've been using crypto pretty much exclusively since 2015. I closed my bank account in 2016. And I kind of forget what the old fiat world's like because I don't do like KYC type stuff. And then once in a while I see people bumping into that. I'm just like, how would you ever do this? Like, I just hit buy, boom, but it's like, well, full address, billing address, here you go, here's this thing, and let me just see and check the charges on your thing if they match here, and like all this kind of hold up a little picture of your ID and all that stuff. And I don't even really see how people deal with that, but apparently if you can get to a system where people are able to more, in a more mainstream way, sort of use technologies that don't require all their ID, their user experience will go up enough to where they just won't do it. And that's one thing about like the cash world as well is people just show up, here's some stack of paper, and then there you go, they get what you want. It's not some other things.
Yeah. I mean that the custodial question is an interesting one. It's something we talk a lot about on our podcast, the Unhashed Podcast. And I'm not sure where I stand on it, to be honest with you. If you talk to Mario Gibney, who is one of our co-hosts, and he runs support over at Blockstream. He thinks that custodial solutions are kind of inevitable. I mean, not to say that we don't already have them, but he sees them as being a huge part of the Bitcoin ecosystem because there's just too many people. And I don't want to speak too much for him because he might have other reasons for thinking this that I'm forgetting. But if I recall correctly, the idea is that there's there's massive efficiencies with centralization, but with centralization you lose privacy, right? And you lose control over your coins. But it's really, really efficient. I mean, if you go on Coinbase, I can send another Coinbase user Bitcoin instantly for free, and I can do the same with any other coin on any other network because I'm not transacting on chain. And that's great user experience. It looks like a wallet. It looks like a bank account. It looks like when I go on Coinbase, I don't have a Coinbase account, but if I did, I know what they look like.
Yeah.
If you go on Coinbase, it looks like a bank account. And really, in some ways, I still have a Chase account. It's easier to send money on Coinbase than it is on Chase, because our legacy banking systems are kind of crappy compared to most other countries, at least. When I was living in Korea, I mean, sending money was just easy. I could send you money to your bank account in 30 seconds at 2 o'clock in the morning. But we have these weird like robotic banking hours that they're still out of hours, so you can't send money at 2 in the morning for some reason, even though it's all a bot that's executing the trade anyway. It's a whole separate topic, but my point is that it's something that we don't really like to talk about in the crypto space, but there are a lot of efficiencies that we get with centralization, and it's going to be very hard. And you can see it also with this PayPal announcement that they're going to be offering Bitcoin sells and purchases, but you can't withdraw the Bitcoin. And for some reason, this one really baffles me. You can't even send the Bitcoin to another PayPal user, which doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, but, once you buy it from their system, you can't even send it to another user?
No, all you can do is hold it and sell it. And so really all it is at that point is you're buying, more or less, you're just buying a speculation on the price of Bitcoin.
Yeah, receipt.
Because you can't withdraw it to send it. So you're just hoping that you can sell it for, well, it's not totally true. You can send it to other PayPal merchants that accept crypto, but even then, the merchants who accept crypto through PayPal don't actually accept the Bitcoin themselves.
It gets converted.
It gets converted to dollars by PayPal. So why does PayPal do this? The reason PayPal does this, most likely, I asked a crypto lawyer that we know named Raphael Jacobi, and he said the reason for this is it's not a regulatory reason. It's a business decision because they have tons of boomers on the platform. And they know that if they let the boomers withdraw the Bitcoin, they're going to lose it. And then they're going to come bitch at PayPal for help me recover my Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Because they're used to the fiat world where you just go to the bank if someone steals your money and then they refund you.
Yeah, which is, it's one of those things where absolutely, if someone else is custodying your funds for you, it's harder for you to lose them. And yes, absolutely, it's hard to make critical mistakes and stuff. Now, and obviously, as on principle, we should always be going for privacy and self-autonomy and all that kind of stuff. However, there's also, like what I said, people care about privacy when it impacts their user experience. And probably the same thing happens with, self-custody. So exchanges are pretty notorious honeypots where they get hacked all the time and people lose their stuff. And I remember not too long ago, like a year or so ago, Wells Fargo's app was down for like a whole week. Pretty much it just wasn't working the whole week and people were screaming they didn't know how to access their money and all this stuff.
Right.
And, pomp tweet of, Bitcoin is never down or whatever. There is something about that decentralization that can improve a user experience on those fringes of it.
Sure.
Now, of course, it's like what amount is ideal to minimize loss of funds? Like if you're an idiot and you take your money and you just lose it, it's probably a much bigger thief than someone honeypotting the exchange or possibly regulators, doing a Cyprus and just taking a haircut off of all your money. It's probably, and
Right.
so those are those two extremes, and it's trying to find a way to, minimize both of those. And so,
Yeah.
do you think how is your optimism versus pessimism on the idea that the average, if not everyone, but maybe say 3 out of 10 people, if we're imagining a fully crypto, future, say 3 out
A
of 10.
Bitcoin standard future
Yes.
idea here. Okay.
Yeah. So what if 3 out of 10 people hold basically keys to all their own money, or almost all of it, or the majority of it? Do you think that that's a realistic future, or is that a little too optimistic, or do you think that's maybe pessimistic?
No. I I don't know if it's directly optimistic or pessimistic. I think that's very possible. I mean, that's just my gut. I don't know if I can cite any, empirical data that tells you why I think that, but I think that's very possible. And, another thing that Mario, one of my co-hosts, would say about the difference of custody in Bitcoin versus the banking system is that, at least with Bitcoin, you can always opt out of the custody. I mean, I guess if they just don't let you take your coins back, then you can't. But if enough people are opted out and you can opt out, then if you feel like things are getting dicey or weird, then you just take your money out. And there's no real way to opt out of the banking system with US dollars. I mean, what are you going to do? If you have $200,000, you're going to withdraw it
Bales of
and
cash.
put it in your mattress? I mean, no, you're not going to do that. But with Bitcoin, it's a little more feasible. And so the threat of custodial solutions, I think he would say, is lower when you're talking about a Bitcoin world. And also, if the standard is Bitcoin, then if one country's custodial solutions are dicey, there's no reason, there's nothing stopping you from putting it into custodial solution somewhere else. But I don't, when I think of someone like my dad, who is almost 70, I I really think if he didn't have me there helping him, or someone that was I don't know, experienced and that he knew he could trust, I really think Coinbase is just frankly a better solution for him than holding it in a hardware wallet. I mean, they haven't had any hacks. It's not to say they won't ever.
Yeah.
People attempt all the time. But their storage is probably pretty good. And they're not likely to exit scam on you. Now, they are known for freezing accounts if there's any sort of what they believe to be suspicious activity. If you you have companies like BlockFi who have publicly said that if you coin join your coins before depositing them, they just won't accept them. And so you have those issues. But someone like my dad who's 70, like, look, this guy has never focused on privacy his entire life. And he's not likely to be doing anything online that is going to flag his account. I mean, there's always the risk. I know I'm going to get butchered by the hardcore decentralists out there, and I share a lot of their opinions. But look, for someone like him, it's either that or nothing. He is not going to custody his own coins. He's going to lose them. And he's going to get burned. He's going to lose all of his money, and he's going to tell all of his friends not to buy Bitcoin because of it. And so I think for the boomers, maybe we need these solutions for them, and then maybe we can slowly phase them out as we improve the user experience of self-custody. I mean, there's just so much work to be done there.
Yeah.
And power users like us, it's easy for people like us to sit here and talk about how easy it is, but even someone like my fiance, who's my age, I just would not trust her to custody her coins. And it's not because she's dumb, or it's just that she's never had to think in that paradigm before. And I think a lot of people in this space forget what a change in thinking they had to do to get used to it. I think it's easy to forget that.
Yeah, especially because things work in a they work on a device basis kind of a thing. Whereas in the
Right.
entire internet age, people are used to accounts. That you have an
Sure.
account, and the account is what matters, not the device that it's on. And it has
Right.
a bunch of issues like that. There's also just the familiarity with the format. Like, I was doing some presentation a couple of years ago, some VC firm in Chicago about and trying to show about sending and receiving with a wallet. Which, as someone who uses crypto a whole lot, I think scanning QR codes and copy and pasting the address is like pretty second nature. It's pretty easy. And there was a lot of like freezing up on that until I showed them this little SMS wallet where you could just text people some crypto.
Oh, is that
And-
like Dropbit or something?
Yeah, it was something called Dash Text, which is a Dash
okay.
only version of some company called Cointext, which unfortunately I believe closed down recently.
Gotcha.
But it was like one of those sorts of things. And they were all of a sudden, they got it and they all wanted to use it. And
Right.
for me, that's not a very good user experience of like, okay, I got to like copy and paste, first the address to load it into the phone. And then you say, send this much USD to this number, beep, and it says go. And like that for me is not a good user experience, but it's so familiar, the phone number format, that people just say,
Right.
this, what is it? The, however many digits it is. It's
Well,
like,
yeah, and then you could say, well, I'll just just replace phone number with Bitcoin address, but we don't want address reuse, so you need a new address for every transaction, and that's confusing for people. And then
Yeah.
you have just explaining to friends, like, okay, so I have this hardware wallet, so my Bitcoins are on this device, and it's like, no, just your private key is on that device.
mm-hmm.
Is being stored on that device, or I guess your private key public key pair.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, I don't understand. So why do I need to keep this thing safe if my Bitcoins aren't on here? And and you need to explain private key public key cryptography to them, which is just, I don't even know if you should. Like, you could try and explain it like sort of like an email password and an email address, but that's an imperfect metaphor. And then people are like, well, okay, where are my Bitcoins? And you're like, well, they're like
out
on they're on every Bitcoin node. And like, so everyone running a node has my Bitcoins, and it's like, no, not exactly. And it's not something that is really intuitive to most people right now. And I think that makes it really difficult for people to understand why do I need to, and like, how does this seed phrase like recover my funds? Like, I don't understand. Like, it's a piece of metal. How does that have anything to do with this electronic device? Like, how does the metal know my Bitcoins? It's just, it's really confusing for people.
The seed phrase thing was funny because I was setting up a boomer who shall remain unnamed with a ledger, and it was trying to do it, saying, all right, you got to do this, that. And then, okay, it was remotely. And I said, okay, now what you're going to want to do is you're going to go write down those seed phrase words, these phrase words. And she said, I already did it. Said, what do you mean you already did it? We didn't get to this step yet. No, I already did it. Like those? No, I wrote down my own. I'm like, you can't just like make up your own words. You have to use the ones that they give you.
Yeah.
Why does that?
Why not? That seems less secure. Like then it's just one of these words,
Yeah.
It's it's funny to me. The I don't want to call it security theater, but there are a lot of things, like when we're talking about boomers, that I think hardcore self-custody people kind of like ignore just the realities of, like, this idea that no, the boomer should still be self-custodying. It's like, okay. So if that's the case, how are they going to self-custody? Are you going to do it for them? Are you going to help them? Like, yeah, I'll help set it up. All right, so they have to trust you. They still have to trust you. And it's like, well, that's better than Coinbase. That's better than, they can trust me more than Coinbase. I'm like, okay, well, that may be true, but it's still a level of trust. And it's like, are they gonna run their own Bitcoin node? Because my dad's not gonna run a Bitcoin node. There's no chance in hell that my dad is gonna. Now, I think you should. If you're a Bitcoin user, I think you should run your own node, your own full node. But my dad's not going to. Even if I set it up for him, there's no guarantee he's going to keep it up so that it has the uptime to stay up to date. And he's not even going to understand why he's running it. And even if he does, he's not going to use it to verify his own transactions. I mean, it's really an impossible ask for so many people at this point. I think this will change. Each generation becomes a little more tech savvy, and if you just grow up with the expectation that like, hey, you got to run this node, and we make nodes easier to run to where they sync faster, and they don't require $100 or $150 worth of equipment to set up, and you make it super easy to verify the GPG keys of the client that you're using. I mean, every step of that process is just full of friction, and I cannot believe the amount of people that I see on Twitter saying that, oh no, it's easy. It's like, dude, you have a master's in computer science. It may be easy for you, but it's not easy for my 30-year-old fiance. It's not even easy for my game developer friends who are very tech literate. I mean, you're asking people to devote maybe 20 or 30 hours of their time to understand this. And I don't know if that's inevitable, if it's always going to be like that. I think we have to hope it's not. Yeah. We have to work like hell to try and make sure it's not. But we also may need to accept that it might be. Like, maybe that's just how it will be. And everyone's going to have their, like, each group of friends has their, like, Bitcoin guy that kind of helps them with this stuff. But I don't know how... Without that, or most people just using custodial solutions, I don't know how this thing really is successful in the way that we want it to be.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is I'm sure there will always be levels to this. Like, for example, back in the day, if you wanted to do any kind of encryption or use any kind of a VPN, you were the nerd amongst nerds. But today, like random, people, normies, will use some sort of end-to-end encryption, whether it's something on WhatsApp, allegedly, or we use Telegram, and then we'll have a VPN. Like, that kind of stuff is very, like, that I would even call easy, to where you could get your friends and possibly family members, as long as they're not super old, as long as they're like smartphone era, you could probably get them to, with a little training, do that level. But then just like the next level deep is where, already getting people to use any kind of a crypto is got to be a little bit challenging. But then you start to throw in, well, you got to run a node. Okay, then you got to be able to, we basically, for that to happen, I think we have to wait till most apartments become already fitted with a node closet, where you put your little thing in and then you run it and just check on it and pet it good night or whatever, like where everyone's kind of doing that. Otherwise, those kinds of advanced things, I don't think anyone will sort of do.
Yeah, it's I agree, but on the other hand, Bitcoin, I guess crypto more largely, is a little bit unique in that, with a VPN, it's easier to encrypt your traffic, but you're still trusting the VPN. I mean, it's still this centralized service with developers who are, when I click connect, like, I'm trusting that the developers are actually connecting me to their server and encrypting my traffic, and not the like, I don't really know. I mean, I think I have a good reason to believe that they are doing what they're saying they are, but there are tons of examples of VPNs not doing those things. And, there's ways to kind of audit this stuff, but okay, I'm still kind of trusting the auditors to tell me the truth.
Yeah.
And I don't have a reason to think they're lying, but with Bitcoin, it's like, you really come to understand, like, okay, in my life, who am I trusting and how much am I trusting them? And like, what are the limits of my ability to verify things for myself? And it's kind of different for everyone. I mean, if I'm Rusty Russell, I can verify these claims a lot better than Colin Aulds can. But then, if you're my dad, it's like 10 degrees less than that. That you basically just have to trust everything if you're my dad. And so I feel like I'm just kind of repeating myself at this point. I've driven the point home, but I guess my point is that crypto is a very, I think in many ways it is unique from previous tech improvements to our privacy that we've tried to make.
In that how easily it allows, or relatively easily, allows people to maintain autonomy.
Well, there's that, but also the costs of user error are so much higher. I mean, it could in a world, in a Bitcoin standard world, financially ruin you. Now, that said, when people have a strong financial interest in understanding something, they tend to understand it, or they tend to get to a place where they can understand it because they're highly incentivized to do so. So if, I often wonder, I keep using my dad as an example because he's just such a good example, I think. If my dad's, fiat net worth depended on him understanding how to run a Bitcoin node, maybe he would do what it took to get to where he understood it.
Yeah, I would think so. I think that definitely,
Yeah. But there is a tipping point there. Like, he can only get to the point where he needs to understand it when there's a Bitcoin standard. And for there to be a Bitcoin standard, you need a whole lot of people who have a lot of their net worth tied up in Bitcoin and understanding how to run a node, for instance, or how to store private keys properly. And so, it's chicken or the egg. Like, I don't know which comes first. It's difficult.
Yeah, the good old chicken and the egg adoption thing. So one last little wrinkle to that whole custody thing is, do you think at some point that people will start to opt into a middle ground where it's not, I'm solely responsible for all my own keys, or I'm giving them all to a company and just trusting that they won't run off with it or whatever, but to where you'll have more like multi-sig type solutions. So it's like me and my brother and a company. Let's just say all three of us have a,
Right.
And so it's like a 2 out of 3 kind of thing. So like if he kicks the bucket, me and the company can still recover it. If, the company, the two of us can get it back, et cetera, to where you have like kind of like shared custody, like not entirely self-custody, but not entirely, institutionally custody.
Yeah, multisig is interesting. I think the user experience is still bad. It's definitely worse than just single sig, Bitcoin experience, but it seems like we're making a lot of progress with multisig, especially the core team seems to be doing a lot of work on this that hopefully, you have the core team like adding the features, and then you hopefully have like third-party people building the tools that make it easier to use. So, or at least that seems to be how things go. And I think really, like, ideally, you get to the point where you can. Oh, sorry, my microphone slipped. You get to the point where you can set up these multi-sigs, where you can like time lock coins if you're like going to hold them for a while. So, hopefully, even if someone got your keys, I guess, like. Well, no, that won't work. Never mind. I was just kind of like thinking on the fly about like how we could use multi-sig going forward. But yeah, Blockstream Green does something like this where it's I always forget. I believe it's a 2 of 2, and or maybe it's a 1 of 2. And if you lose your phone, then like there's a 2-factor authentication where they hold another key and you can get the coins that way. I always forget how it works, but they use a multi-sig that kind of works that way, where like they don't know the private key on the multi-sig, but it's like encrypted behind a 2-factor authentication so that you can get it yourself. But they kind of custody it for you. So I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but
yeah, well, it's like, I think especially when you start getting to advanced forms that you can actually set up easily with, that's the big caveat, right?
Right.
Where you start adding some time locks in it too. Like, for example, it could be 100% self-custody, right? Where you only own the keys up until a certain period of time. Like if you lose your keys and it's like 6 months to a year and you haven't touched your wallet, then all of a sudden it goes to like a multi-sig thing where you trust some people with recovery, but they don't have everyday access of it.
Yeah, this is something that we've tried to think about in terms of like inheritance and estate, and Bitcoin and crypto generally poses some really unique issues with inheritance, and finding a way to transfer coins trustlessly is, I think at this point, it's, well, I mean, you could do it trustlessly. I mean, you could just tell someone like, here's where my keys are, but then you have to worry about them taking them before you die. So
Yeah.
Brian and I have done a lot of work trying to figure out how to do this, and and with Ruben Thompson, who is he's the maintainer of the Bitcoin mailing list. And as of now, it is not possible to do this trustlessly. But I think, if I recall, it's been a while since I've thought about this, so I'm fuzzy on the specifics. But I believe Ruben said that it's possible that once Taproot is activated, might be able to do something like that trustlessly, where you can use the coins while you're alive, but if you don't check in within 6 months, they get transferred to someone else. And you could even set up that they get sent to a multisig where one goes to your lawyer and one goes to your kid and one goes to, I don't know, some other custodian that you choose, and then you need 2 of the 3 people to come together and then give the coins.
Yeah, and if you could set all that up within 30 minutes, that's like the holy grail. Like where you just you have like a wizard and you just go through and just say, all right, what's the key of this person? What's the key of this person? Slide the parameters around, hit yes, everyone signs, boom, you're done.
Right.
And you're set for life, basically,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so easy to get wrong right now. And I don't even think the tech is there to do it trustlessly. Like right now, what Brian and I thought about doing was creating sort of similar to Blockstream Green, where you pay a service to transmit a transaction under certain circumstances. And man, it was like kind of complicated. And that's the issue, right? Like, complicated is the enemy of security.
Of course.
But there's just exactly. But I think a lot of people, that seems unintuitive. You think like, oh, I'd make this really complicated scheme and it'll be the most secure. It's actually, no, the more complicated you make it, the more attack surface there is. But the issue with the service is that they could always withhold the service would basically hold an encrypted version of your private key. So the service wouldn't actually have your private key. They would have some encrypted version of it, but you still need them to give it to you. So they could kind of hold your coins at ransom without being able to steal them themselves. So it's like sort of a, I don't know, Mexican standoff, if that makes any sense. Like, you both kind of need each other, but needing this service is something that you kind of want to avoid as well. But there's no other way to do it right now.
Yeah, and that's kind of a better situation than a confiscation situation, which is just the worst. Like, I don't understand how people ever give their money to any entity that could just decide to keep it. And when they keep it, like, they get it. So there's a financial incentive to provide you with bad customer service.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's a huge problem. I mean, there just seems to be a never-ending amount of problems to solve in this space, which is, I mean,
so it makes it exciting.
That's kind of always the case. You as you solve problems, you change your I guess your definition of what a problem is to be more sensitive, and you just slowly fix smaller and smaller problems until the whole thing is pretty easy to use. But that seems to be what you guys are hacking away at. So where could people find more about the stuff that you guys do? Yeah, so I mean, you can just go to privacypros.io, really easy to remember, and we sell our products there, but we also write tons of guides and content, reviews, just all that kind of stuff to try and make it a little easier for people to shore up privacy stuff. And we're very honest about the fact that, I'm not a cybersecurity professional, but when I don't know something, I go find someone who is, and that's who we get to write the guides. So it's really for the average person who just wants to increase their privacy a little bit more every day. And that's what we try to do over at Privacy Pros, and also help you back up your Bitcoin. So that's what the BillFodl is for. It's just, if it wasn't clear by now, it's a stainless steel plate with stamped letters. So you're not having to give us your recovery phrase. You just recreate it using these letters. And if you ever have a fire or a flood or anything like that hit your house, your backup's probably going to survive. So,
well, fantastic. Well, thanks very much for coming on. Hope you have a great one.
Thanks, Joel. Appreciate it. Had fun.